Hello everyone, thanks for dropping by. In case you didn't recognise her, that's Eva Jean Lilly, and as you can see she's promoting Ant-Man and the Wasp. I've only seen her in Ant-Man, but surprisingly she was in Lost. I didn't recognise her till later when I've looked up what she'd done. I used to watch Lost, but it just got convoluted and just plain weird, so it got boring, so I stopped watching it. Anyway, as you can see, she's promoting Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I've got most of the Infinity Saga on 4K Blu-ray, and I'll be watching that on Saturday evening if it's not too hot, because it looks like we've got another heat wave building up here in Britain. As for Lily there, she's 5'5", or more or less the same height as me, so the usual question is nope. She's been married before, and her current boyfriend, who she's got 2 children with, is about 4 to 5 inches taller than me, so Eva Jean there likes guys who are much taller than her. But as before, it'd be interesting to see what she looks like in real life, but apart from that, I wouldn't even think of going anywhere near her. Anyway, enough about Eva Jean. I was looking round on the YouTube over the weekend and on Better Bachelor channel, I came a word, heteropessimism. No, I've never heard of that before, so I thought I'd have a look around to find out what it's all about, and it's somewhat interesting. I found a load of stuff, but I've trimmed it all down to about half a dozen. First thing is this, as you can see, the conversation, academic rigour, journalistic flair, probably leftish, and what is heteropessimism and why do men and women suffer from it? This was done June 28th and 2022, and sentiments. No, heteropessimism is a new word for an intuitive, possibly very old concept in white Western culture. Started in 2019 by a woman. Heteropessimism is an attitude of disappointment, embarrassment, or despair at the state of heterosexual relations, specifically about being in one. In other words, it's code for a woman getting bored in the relationship. It says, second definition is useful because this pessimism is accompanied by the paradoxical practice of sticking with heterosexuality in its current forms, even as it is judged to be irredeemable. Saracen now uses the term heterofatalism to emphasize how dire, hopeless and lacking in visions for an alternative this attitude is. That comes across as the alphabet crowd doesn't like the idea of straight women forming a relationship in a heterosexual marriage. And if you drop down, what is heteropessimism? Heteropessimism describes a negative attitude and pervasive heterosexual culture. That's the dominant culture within many of the men and women who co-create it. Heteropessimism does not necessarily imply violent or harmful relationships, overt sexism, abuse, or even a hierarchy. In fact, many heteropessimistic relationships likely start with real desire for romantic, sexual, intimate connection. And it says heteropessimism describes something more mundane. It's a pervasive disappointment, ambivalence, if not doubt, about the quality of lived heterosexual experience, i.e., marriage is a boring, predictable pattern, but you're in a heterosexual experience, but the woman is getting bored. Now it mentions heterofatalism. Fast forward to June 24th, 2025. This is, as you can see, the New York Post. New York Times ridiculous heterofatalism embraces further evidence of sad, sickly post-millennial outlook. It says, dating is hard. Whoops. It says, dating is hard, but blaming all men for their horrible choices is easy. A New York piece, The Trouble with Married Men, by Jean Garrett, another woman, posits that the trouble with wanted men is men. In other words, Jean Garrett sounds like she's a lesbian. And part of the genre of man-hating thought pieces that turn hetero love and dating into an all-out gender war and totally absolve women of any agency or responsibility in their relationship, i.e. accountability is like kryptonite to women. And that's the link to the article, but it's behind a paywall, so bugger that. And says there's no accountability for introspection, just the big diagnosis that men are the problem from a woman who has decided to pursue open relationships, casual sex, and situationships into middle age. In other words, she's a 304. And then it's a sad, sickly, post-millennial take on Sex and the City that further evidence just how bleak the modern romantic outlook really is. And if you drop down, she's the author of it. She looks like a lesbian. And it says, it also raises its ugly head when you walk past a couple holding each other close outside a subway and arguably gags. Of course, that's called jealousy. What has it left this woman so hurt, so bitter, so hetero-fatalistic? Well, her dating past is colourful, to put it kindly, i.e. she was a 304. She reveals that her open marriage fell apart because she fell in love with another man, i.e. she was thinking of monkey branching, in fact toppled the whole structure of her life for a man who told her from the outset he did not know how to do relationships, and yes, the classic. Later she reveals she sometimes brings her daughter. Well, she had a daughter with some guy. Does the daughter know who the father is? Along with dates to this man who won't commit to anything more than a sexual relationship, i.e. this guy was probably Chad. And then Sex in the City, here in Warrington and occasionally in Manchester. I've seen groups like that with my own eyes. At a table, group of women sat together, and I immediately saw 4 red flags. So even in my bit of England, I've seen that kind of thing. Anyway, she alludes to the character Sex in the City about what he's just not into you. Who are these men she speaks of? For all the complaints I feel with friends and these dating lives, men failing to show up for sex is not one. Heterofatalism is just one of the many academic terms she uses. We also learn about complementary two-word two-ness, nominated male alexithema, and an emotional labour, amongst others. Fancy words and citations allow her to hide behind the academic parade, in other words, bullshit baffling brains, and avoid analysing what her own choices are actually what's making her so miserable. And she's the one who termed heterofatalism. That's a red flag. And she's cut her hair, so she's obviously a closet lesbian. Well, as you can see, that's the New York Post. Going further, I found this Glamour 25. This was done on 31st of July 2025, and says single women are the midst of a quiet crisis because these days there's nothing more embarrassing than falling in love with a straight man. After all, social media is filled with the brim of rhetoric about many shortcomings of almost, if not all, the potential male partners out there. An example of a recent doom scroll, one video shows a woman picking up after a sloppy partner. Well, she's the one that picked him. In another, a woman quizzes him on his pitiful contributions to the child care. She's the one who chose him. A third clip shows yet another woman befuddled by her partner's gaming addiction. The partner he's more into gaming to get away from her for a bit of escapism. So she must be a sort of a Nagasaurus. And so next, a serious woman stares into the camera and proselytize about red flags that mean you should leave him immediately. Men, am I right? Each woman seems to say with a despairing eye roll as Sabrina Carpenter's man-child plays over the clip. And it seems that a lot of straight women are coming to the realization that while they might date them, love them, marry them, and have kids with them, they don't actually like the straight men all that much. And in turn, some women are beginning to perform their disaffection and embarrassment at their own heterosexuality. In other words, it seems to be a lesbian and homosexual way to get at women who are in relationships, to get them to leave the relationships and join the lesbian and homosexual rank and file, because lesbians and homosexuals are incapable of increasing their number through having babies, i.e. procreation. But anyway, you get a headache reading all these articles. And digital culture has changed dating for women, which now operates increasingly like a capitalist marketplace. Of course, it's a business. And then more yada yada yada. Moving on. I've also found this, post 45, from Heteropessimism. Now, the only thing, it said more or less the same thing, but this is the one that stands out. Females, however, and effeminate men, i.e. homosexuals, some homosexual men, enjoy having people to wail with them. Aristotle. So Aristotle, 2,500 odd years ago, he had the measure of women. But reading this, it's more the alphabet and lesbianism and all that kind of thing. You get a headache reading it. Also, moving on, New York Post. This was done on... Is there a date? No, there's not a date. I thought I saw a date. Never mind. This was done July 22 this year. Now, this is the backlash against heteropessimism and heterofatalism. Growing trend of hating men seems to backfire as marriage movement leaves single women losing out. So, a growing anti-marriage movement is being fueled by viral TikTok trends and high-profile celebrities painting men as the enemy. But according to according to a new column, women may ultimately be the ones losing out, and they see them on TikTok complaining about it. In a USA Today columnist, Ingrid Jack warned of a new rising wave of heteropessimism, defining as a woman's growing feelings of disappointment and antagonism toward relationships with men. So, once again, the feminist crowd doesn't like to see that the tide is turning against them, so they're having a go at women that are in relationships with guys to get them to dump that relationship with guys with the buzzword heteropessimism and heterofatalism. She argued that terms like divorce glow-ups, whatever that is, and anti-male literature have actively widened the divide between the sexes. Well, women have done that for a start by being brainwashed by feminism. Studies show that married women are not only happier but also live longer and earn more than their single counterparts. She explained that the media modern women consume is increasingly hostile toward traditional relationships, while the media that they consume is generally to the left and feminist assorted literature, pointing to best-selling books like Yesteryear, which centers on a trad wife influencer. In the novel, men are reduced to lazy, tropic troops. Either a man is an idiotic man-baby, lacks ambition or the brain, or the quintessential patriarch who pals around with other sexual pigs in the manosphere. Husbands are at one point referred to as freaks. That gives you an idea what that book is like, and women consume it. And then she's a mud shark. And it said, Jack linked the shift directly to liberal ideology, i.e. leftish, noting that left-leaning Americans choose to opt out of traditional family lifestyles far more than conservatives. Of course. But the population is going down, and the leftists don't want to procreate, but conservatives do. So this is another pop from the left at the conservatives and the men, and especially using women in these relationships to get the relationship to break down. Wherever you look these days, women who free themselves from the chains of marriage are being celebrated. But then after they find out that they're on their own, they complain on TikTok. And then more yada yada yada. Now, they're starting to wonder why men are opting out. I found this, Zero Hedge. This was done May 23rd this year. No wonder men are opting out. If you drop down, the modern women are perspective. They are the most miserable, anxious and insecure cohort in living memory. Hardly great marriage material. Most married women go off sex, of course, and the husband who objects is seen as a problem. Many women don't actually like men very much. They've been indoctrinated by feminism since we're little girls. The more educated she is, i.e. college degree, the higher the contempt. She won't date down to a blue-collar man. She wants a top 10% or 5% or higher man, 6 foot tall, 6-figure salary, and preferably a six-pack in his stomach. They've gone full throttle left, well, we've all seen that, and 3/4 of college-educated women won't even date a man who votes differently. So if Mr. 666 voted for Trump and the woman voted for Kamala, then she wouldn't date him even though Mr. 666 ticks all the boxes. They've rigged the education system and colonized corporate and institutional life, turning universities and workplaces into man-repellent factories. Well, they might have done that, but AI is going to put a kibosh on all that. Yet their hypergamy is still running hot. In other words, they're still picky. Despite outnumbering men in education and careers, they still demand a tall, equally high-status unicorn, unless he voted for Trump. The modern female threat detection system is hyperactive. Almost any male behavior, silence, jokes, opinions, breathing, gets flagged as a red flag. In other words, the melodramatic drama queens. They are extremely well versed in the lucrative economics of divorce, including a well-timed false allegation to eliminate tedious shared parenting. In other words, she has the baby, the house, and half his stuff. What rational man reads this list and thinks, yes, that's exactly what I've been missing from my life? Not me. I'd rather live on my own. It's nice and peaceful on your own. And where is the other bit? The contempt for men is hardly surprising. That's why they've been taught. Mary Harrington, a woman, British journalist and culture critic who writes on Substack, frequently criticizing what she calls the femisphere, online feminist spaces where women bond together with shared grievances about men. And not only does this toxic climate encourage women to be wary of men, but growing up in a hate-filled fuel online sewer takes a toll on their mental health. I've covered that bit before. And then more yada yada. Am I getting on to half an hour? Yep, nearly half an hour. I have to start wrapping things up. Marriage is the primary incentive for sustained male economic effort. It has always been. Elrich knew this in 1983, and The Economist has now confirmed it. There's an economic research paper, The Declining Labour Market Prospects of Less Educated Men, i.e. blue collar, which establishes the prospect of providing a family constitutes a critical male labour supply incentive, and the decline of stable marriage directly removes it. The researchers of the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas calculated that declining marriage rates are responsible for roughly half the drop of hours men work, i.e. if he's not married, he's not going to do overtime. I never did overtime unless it was compulsory. And then remove the marriage and you remove the responsibility. The data's been telling this for decades. And that's the zero hedge. To finish this off, I found this, the zero hedge, June 15th, 2026. As you can see, the media wants to know men are walking away from liberal society. They've had enough. Now, if you drop down, you get a graph. South Korea, America, Germany, and here in Britain. Now, MGTOW, as you know, started around 2000. So in America, 2000, it really started kicking off, getting noticed in 2005. You see the rise, ideological gap, and then as women got more left wing, guys got more right wing, and see the divide. Germany, it was more or less the same. There's MGTOW, and German women went left wing, and here in Britain, we're a bit behind America, so there it dropped down, rose a bit because the newspapers are shaming men, the gutter press as they call it over here, but still British women went far left. But look at South Korea, the 4B movement there, and the men just said fuck it, and women went that way and men went the other. And then we have the rest about the Guardian, yada yada yada. But if you drop down to the comments, the first one, once you've seen a friend or two destroyed by divorce, you wise up. So it seems the growing trend of hating men seems to backfire as the anti-marriage movement leaves single women losing out. And 2030 is only about just over 4 years away from now, so it's going to get rather bad for women. And this hetero-pessimism, hetero-fatalism, is the alphabet mob seeing a different tactic to get women out of relationships and join the rank and file, because the alphabet mob can't procreate and they need new people coming in all the time to keep the numbers up. I could be wrong on that, but we'll have to wait and see. I think I'm on half an hour now, so you know the routine, people, like, dislike, etc. It's completely up to you. So until next Monday, I'll see if I can find something more on this, but it might not, it might be something else. But until then, that's it from me. Bye bye.